The overwhelming majority of Minnesotans want strong action to stop gun violence. And the overwhelming majority of Minnesotans want us to rein in ICE and prevent them from doing terrible things at schools and other safe places that should be safe. Last night, every single Republican in the Minnesota House of Representatives voted to block progress on both of those issues. We are very disappointed, but we are not deterred, and this is not over. I have been saying for months now that House DFLers will use every tool in the toolbox to have meaningful action occur on gun violence and on ICE. And last night we used one of those tools and forced a vote on the House floor on bills that are critically important to Minnesotans. You know, these are issues that most Minnesotans don't find controversial. It is really only in the Capitol that people think that it's controversial whether ICE should be involved in schools. And it's only controversial here when people are talking about whether people should have these weapons of war on our streets. It is incredibly frustrating and disappointing that not one House Republican was willing to side with the average Minnesotans, not to mention the families and parents of Annunciation children. But we have not given up. There are still many weeks left in this session, and we will fight all the way to the end. And if we are not successful, we'll fight on the campaign trail, and we will win a majority, and we will pass the bills in 2027 if necessary. We will never give up on these issues.
Last night's vote mattered. It mattered to the families who have been pouring their hearts out and coming up to the Capitol and asking us to take action. It mattered to the public who has been overwhelmingly crying for us to take meaningful action on gun violence prevention. And it mattered because it only would have taken one Republican. It was a 68 vote threshold, would have just taken one vote to advance the bill further. And not a single Republican was willing to do that. Many Republicans have not even been clear to the public about where they have stood on these issues. They have been hiding from their constituents, and that's because they know that their constituents are demanding action. 80% of suburban voters want meaningful action on gun violence. That's higher than the district I represent. Yep. And we saw last night Representative Andrew Myers, Representative Danny Dedeaux, Representative Whitty, and more vote to not advance gun violence prevention in Minnesota. That is a total failure of their ability to represent what their constituents are demanding, and it's a total failure of this body to do what the families of Annunciation have been very clearly calling for. They have said they have had two top demands, and that is to prevent assault weapons from getting in the hands of folks like the Annunciation shooter, and to take away the ability to have high-capacity magazines that did so much damage in such a short period of time in Annunciation. This was a total failure of public leadership from Republican House members.
It's been 212 days since Annunciation happened, and yesterday the vote that we saw was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking because families, and as you heard, 2/3 of Minnesotans, everywhere we go, are asking us, what are you gonna do to protect our kids and our communities from these weapons that were made for war? And yesterday, our Republican colleagues said they wouldn't even work on it. They did everything in that debate, and this is what we have seen in committee. They talked about anything and everything except for these guns made for war that murdered 2 children in my community, but have done and inflicted damage across our state and our country. And to me, the most heartbreaking thing is that we have kids saying, do something, choose us, not these guns. And yesterday, our Republican colleagues wouldn't even do that, wouldn't even advance the bill. And so we are gonna, as Leader Stevenson said, we are gonna do everything in our power. We have 8 weeks, and we have 4 months, and we have a year and we have 10 years if it takes that. But I don't think it will, because there's very few issues where 70% of Minnesotans are demanding us to do something. And what we need is our colleagues to reflect that across the aisle and do something about these weapons of war.
Go ahead.
For every single Minnesotan, it is impossible to not open your eyes to what ICE has done to our communities and in particular our schools and children. We know you all as reporters have reported on, you've recorded it with your cameras, the violence that ICE has inflicted on our communities. And yesterday we tried to move a bill that would just say, can we at least protect our schools? Can we at least protect our children while they're learning? And every single Republican said no. They tried to stay off the board, but then when they realized they couldn't, they voted no. It's an easy choice. It's a choice between protecting our schools and our children at schools or just allowing this violence that we've seen to continue. Our Republican colleagues even know this is an issue. 4 Republican colleagues sent a letter to then Secretary Kristi Noem asking this to stop. Republicans in the Senate voted to advance this bill unanimously out of committee. We just saw what happened, and we saw it with our own eyes. It happened to us. I've seen it myself in my schools and my community. And so Republicans made this about political wins and not about protecting children at school in their communities.
We'll take questions.
Does this mean, I don't know how to phrase this question, does it make it harder for you all to come back and compromise going out on a note like this?
You know, I think that we'll keep talking and we'll keep working. Every legislative session has moments of conflict, and we're often able to get things done after that. So we'll keep working at it and we'll keep trying. It is incredibly frustrating to us to see that Republicans weren't even open to the conversation, because, you know, if we had been successful last night, those bills would not have become law. They would have moved to the general register, been teed up for floor action. And so there would have been opportunities to continue the discussion and work together on it in the House. And I think you heard last night the bill authors say that in their remarks, that they were willing to have that conversation. So it is really frustrating and upsetting that Republicans are so determined to block these bills at all costs, even though 80% of Minnesotans in their districts support them. But we'll keep at it.
That the procedural move, to move it onto the general register failed last night, does that really limit your ability to do something like this in the future? By that I mean, wouldn't it take suspending the rules in the future, which would require more votes? I mean, was this kind of your golden opportunity to just pick off one person in the Republican caucus? Now you would need a broader coalition?
It was an opportunity to advance the ball with one vote. As you know, there's many different tools in the toolbox of a legislator. Another one is the rule suspension. You're right, that requires 90 votes. But there are many other opportunities as well. There's going to be a lot of discussions and negotiations on a variety of topics as we move towards the end of session. And nothing is ever dead here until we go sine die. So as I have said repeatedly, we will use every tool in our toolbox to make progress on these issues. That particular rule that we used last night to have the vote is not available after committee deadline. It expires at committee deadline. So, you know, we made a good faith effort to move these bills through the regular order. All 3 of these bills had at least one committee hearing. Representative Greenman's bill had 2. So we attempted to do it that way. That didn't work. We attempted to use this rule. That didn't work. And we will continue to attempt using every tool that we have available.
Can you talk a little bit about those tools? I mean, as Caroline mentioned, suspending the rules seems to be the one that comes to mind most prominently. But what other tools do you guys feel you have in your back pocket to move this forward?
Well, you know, I'm not going to show all my cards, but, you know, there was a mention of the rule suspension. That is a tool that is available to us. Whether we use that is a question. As I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of discussions and negotiations on a variety of subjects as we move towards the end of session that will present opportunities for compromise and discussion. So those are a couple of the ones I would mention, but there are others.
Representative West, I think it was Representative West, talked about maybe he would be willing to negotiate on the ICE bill if there was movement on his daycare's bill. Is there any of those conversations happening behind the scenes, or, you know, hopes of bringing one of your Republican colleagues along?
You know, speaking generally, there's a lot of conversations happening behind the scenes. Whether we can find someone who's willing to stand up to the MAGA activists that have a stranglehold on the Republican Party is an open question. Because with these issues, as with many things in the ages of Trump, you will have a lot of Republicans who will say behind closed doors that they would like to see progress on a bill, that they agree with you, that they think what's happening is terrible, and then when you get out in public, they aren't willing to vote that way. And I think that's what Leader Long was talking about, that one of the virtues of what happened last night is that every member of the Minnesota House was forced to take a side and clearly show the public, are you with the gun lobby or are you with kids? Are you with ICE or are you with kids? And every single Democrat voted to advance those three bills, and every single Republican voted against it. So now constituents all across Minnesota know where their representative stands on those issues.
There's a bill in the Senate this morning that would expand who can petition for a red flag law, not a major expansion, but the definition of a family member. You know, because that's already a law on the books, I'm wondering maybe if you think Republicans would, one, be amenable to something like that, and two, is that, you know, if there were more progress on that front, is that sufficient for House Democrats when it comes to gun violence prevention?
It is not sufficient. You know, we are going to keep fighting for a high-capacity magazine ban and an assault weapons ban until they are law. But it would be a step forward to strengthen our very successful red flag laws. You know, there's been good discussion in the last year and data showing that the red flag laws are saving lives. That is clear. They're being used all across the state of Minnesota in areas that are deeply conservative and in areas that are progressive. And that is really encouraging to me. I think we're seeing some law enforcement that was skeptical of it early on. You know, some rural sheriffs who were skeptical of that law who are now using it, which is great because that means that lives are being saved. So if we can make that law even stronger, we will absolutely do that. But that doesn't mean that we would give up on the bills that we attempted to move last night. Are you going to say that? Or go ahead.
I was just going to say, because in public safety, we have been working on many bills including the red flag laws, including binary triggers and continuing to ban binary triggers and straw purchasers. We have been working on a broad set of things as a caucus, and we cannot get the GOP to focus on the guns. And that is the problem, is they will talk about anything else except for the guns. Yet on Wednesday, we saw members vote against a bill that had become law with Republican votes because the gun lobby came out against it. And so I think when we talk about our comprehensive agenda, we are saying, and I think this is what the public wants, we need to do everything we can. And there's lots of things we can do. But at the center of that is these guns that make these mass casualty events more deadly and are terrorizing our streets, and that is what the public is asking us to do. And so it is, there's a picking and a choosing, and then, but the GOP will not, and it's not just assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, it is all of these bills that are about the technology, the guns that are hurting people.
I was just gonna add that on the red flag law in particular, the argument we hear from Republicans over and over on gun bills is it won't work, it won't help, it won't do anything. We heard that so many times last night. Red flags is an example where we have actual data, we have actual proof that this has saved lives in Minnesota. And we know from other states that assault weapons bans and high-capacity magazine bans would also save lives. But you just have to look at a bill we passed 2 years ago to know that these bills work and these bills do save lives.
Your Republican colleagues talked about some of the efforts to get more mental health funding for students, put in new security in schools. Is that part of an eventual school safety proposal for you, in addition to some of these firearm restrictions?
Look, the House DFL has been a longtime champion for mental health. We're a longtime champion for school funding. But make no mistake, Republicans are trying to change the subject when they do that. They're trying to avoid accountability on the gun measures when they talk about those things. They understand that the public wants action on guns, and they're not willing to do it because of the gun lobby, and so they'll want to talk about anything else. Do I care about mental health? Absolutely. And I think it's criminal how much we're underfunding our schools, which has a bearing on lots of things, including safety. But the core of this issue is that we allow too many dangerous guns on our streets. And we need to do something about that too. And it's not acceptable to just change the subject every time we try to do something on guns. That's not what voters want.
Is bonding something you guys would leverage negotiations on, either guns or ICE bills?
We believe that the bonding bill should be clean. We don't think the bonding bill should be held hostage for unrelated policy demands. It's too important. There are infrastructure needs all across the state of Minnesota, and a lot of people's jobs depend on that work. So we won't be holding the bonding bill hostage, and we will be very unhappy if anyone else tries to do that.
When you guys had the trifecta, I don't even recall any of the high-capacity magazines or assault weapons even getting a hearing at the time, because the political reality in the Senate was such that there weren't the votes there, and there's still a question that there might not be the votes in that caucus today. But with that in mind, I mean, are you guys reflecting on, could you have done something sooner on this? Should you have brought it up at the time? Why, I know why now, not then, but you guys did have total control. Now you're dealing with an additional hurdle with Republicans in the House, having a tied House.
During the trifecta, we passed the most meaningful gun violence prevention measures that have passed in Minnesota in a generation. The red flag law and background checks. And it was not easy. Every year that I have been in this place, I voted in favor of background checks and red flag laws. And every year until 2023, I saw those bills die in the Senate. It was a fight to get those bills, and they're saving lives now. The fact that we didn't do every single bill under the sun in the 5 months of the 2023 session does not mean that it was a failure. We were able to do something historic on guns, and people are alive today because of it. And by the way, I think people need to pay attention to what's happening in the Senate. Their bill is moving. It passed through committee with unanimous DFL support, including some senators that there had been a lot of speculation about in the public. And so, Republicans like to try and shift the blame onto the DFL over this issue. But as we saw last night, every single Democrat voted to advance those bills, and every single Republican voted no. We only needed one, and we couldn't even get one Republican to do something meaningful on gun violence. They are the obstacle on this issue.
Your colleague, Representative Cagle, brought up a concern for another member's safety. over some of the clips that are getting isolated and put out on social media. Can you just talk about the concerns you have for all of your safety and the way that you all talk to each other and about each other in this building?
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal issue for us, obviously, given what we've been through in the last year, and a great number of members, either in public ways or in ways that aren't visible to the public, are experiencing threats and worry about their safety. And it's a real problem, and certainly overheated rhetoric contributes to that. And I was glad to hear some acknowledgement of that from Republicans last night. And I think it's helpful that we have that desk empty on the floor right next to Representative Jordan. I think it's a reminder to us all about, words have consequences.
On that point, there's a couple of ideas out there about improving safety for lawmakers, and I think the biggest one that stands out is the creating a new protective services unit within Capitol Security, which is overseen by State Patrol, obviously. What do you make of that, and is it incumbent on the legislature in this moment after June 14th to do something like that, make it better, learn from the mistakes of that night in terms of notification to lawmakers about the scope of the threat?
Yeah, I mean, public safety is a necessity for everybody, and everyone deserves to be safe in their work. Public officials are the same, and clearly we have a distinct problem with violence directed at public officials, not just legislators, judges, executive branch officials. And I hope that we can address all of that this year. But I also hope that we can address the threats that kids going to school experience from gun violence, because they deserve to be safe too. And, we'll do whatever we can to make this building a safe place for everyone who comes here. Legislators, staff, school kids. But we also want to make sure kids are safe at their schools.
Yep.
That's important too. And it's just so frustrating that we can't get a single Republican to help us make our schools safe for the kids that go there.
Where do you feel, just broadly, that the relationship between the two parties lies right now? Last year, I think there was a lot of talk about bipartisanship and collaborative work. Obviously, the two parties disagreed on a lot, but is that spirit gone, do you think, this year?
I think that every legislative, as I said a little while ago, every legislative session has its ups and downs and has its points of conflict. If you had asked me on the day we started the real session in 2025, the question you just asked, I could have said, well, yeah, it's pretty bad, and right? I mean, I don't know that it's ever been worse than it was at that point. And we were able to get a budget done without a shutdown, and we were able to have that working together moment. And that's why I say this isn't over. There's a lot of session left, and we had a frustrating and upsetting night last night, but we know from experience that the fight isn't over, and we can still get stuff done. And we're going to use every single day in the remaining weeks of session to try and get something done. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make sure that everybody understands that this is absolutely a bipartisan issue outside everywhere in Minnesota except for right here in the state capitol. Like, this is gun violence prevention is absolutely something that people want to see us do, want to see us work on. And last night, my bill, the high capacity magazine bill, I had started this work after Mark and Melissa were murdered in June, and then accelerated in August after Annunciation murders. And from there, I had talked to many, many Republicans, and high capacity magazine ban is a bipartisan issue, even here. Just people have to vote for it. I have at least 5 Republicans that told me yes, that they wanted to do this and they wanted to make progress on this issue. And high capacity magazine ban is a very small slice. It's very clear exactly what can and should move forward, but they want to talk about this, and they want to talk about that, instead of actually what is going on and what we can do to help keep people safe in the middle of a shooting. And so it's really important to understand that that the will and the want to do it is there. We just need people to push the right button in order to make sure to get that done. And so we hope that last night was a really good opportunity for everybody to show where they're at. And we had the votes last night, I thought anyway, to get something moving forward. So this wasn't just a Hail Mary kind of thing. The votes were there to do something last night, and they didn't end up going that direction. So it's really frustrating that that was there. But this is a bipartisan issue that everybody can get around for all of Minnesota.
Have those 5 Republicans ever promised you their vote?
They have not promised me their vote. They have very clearly said this is an issue that they want to work on, and it's also surprising Republicans as well that you wouldn't normally expect to be in this position. And so they're out there, and we want to make sure to give them every opportunity they can to do the right thing to help save lives in Minnesota due to gun violence.
And I just also want to say that the votes matter. You can look at the Sahan Journal, has a great compendium of what every legislator has said on the issue of ICE. And there are many, many legislators in the House that have been, Republican legislators, that have been extremely critical of ICE and said mistakes were made, that schools should be protected. 4 of my colleagues, including Chair Kresha, Chair Bennett, Vice Chair Mueller, and Vice Chair Bakeberg, sent a letter to Kristi Noem asking for the bill that I had to be policy again. Donald Trump himself used to have a policy, but when time came to actually vote to make something law and not just say something, the time to do something, every Republican failed to do something and instead blocked action to keep our kids safe at school. This is a bare minimum. This is common sense. This is something everyone in Minnesota wants, is for kids to be safe at school. And when Republicans had the ability to take action, they didn't.
Representative Temke, what do you attribute the breakdown between, people offering support behind the scenes and voting for the bill to? Is that the gun lobby? Is that Republican leadership? Where does that breakdown happen?
Yeah, that's absolutely the gun lobby and money. Like that's what is stopping progress on this, is making the folks working to keep people in line with the politics of things, and it is 100% that, as we need people to step out and have political courage in this time.
And I'll just say, that was visually on display when we had the bill. We had parents and first responders and the voices of community, and then the testifiers on the other side were both the gun lobby and the gun industry. The folks who make money making and selling these guns, and the folks who make membership by keeping them there. And that was the difference.
Are you hopeful at all that having a little reset will help when you come back, taking a little time away from this building?
I would guess that all 134 members are looking forward to the break and the time away from this place, but more than that, what I really hope is that this break gives some of my colleagues a chance to get perspective. I hope it gives them a chance to talk to their constituents and hear from their constituents. And one of the valuable things about what happened last night is we made crystal clear to the public who believes what, who's willing to vote which way. And now, as members head back to their communities for a week, the public has the chance to react to that and tell members, I don't like what you did. I want you to work on this. I think kids should be safe at school. I think that guns, we don't need these weapons of war on our street. There is a meaningful chance for accountability this week. But even if nothing changed, accountability is coming because we have an election in not too many months. And this will absolutely be an issue in the fall election. And, it's not a winning strategy in an election to vote against 80% of your constituents.
If you had to sum up the session so far in one word, what would you pick?
Frustrating. It's been a frustrating session. But it's not over, and we'll keep fighting. It's also not uncommon for this place to be frustrating. Thank you. Thank you.